I would say the most Christian experience I've had in my life has been recently at AA meetings. So I quit drinking and drugs 22 years ago this week, actually, weirdly. And I never went to an AA meeting, not one. And I thought I had such a low opinion of like therapy. I never went to therapy and like the program and talking about yourself, just some narcissistic circle jerk. I just hated the whole idea.
Yeah.
Then I had one of my favorite relatives got way up in trouble with that stuff, and so I was like, we should go to an AA meeting. So I've been to 4 or 5 AA meetings with him.
Oh, whoa. Okay, but the last time I heard you talking about this, you said that you had been to one because Russell Brand dragged your ass. So that's changed.
No, that was the other day. That was recently.
Okay.
I went with Russell Brand and this relative.
Okay. Yeah.
And I love Russell Brand.
Sounds like a cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I had
At
dinner
our
with him
expense.
Friday night. But what a wonderful man. Oh, and Bobby Kennedy. I went to an AA meeting with Bobby Kennedy also, with the same relative. But the point is, when you go to an AA meeting, I didn't know this because I didn't know anything about them. You can't speak until you admit that you're like a loathsome, out of control piece of garbage.
Yeah.
Well, you have
And
to
step
identify
one-
as an
step
alcoholic.
You
one.
literally say I'm an
Yeah.
alcoholic. Is there anything? And by the way, I was an alcoholic, and like I guess I had admitted that to some extent. I was like, I quit drinking, whatever. But I'd never one time described myself as one, and that's the price of admission. If like, hi, I'm Tucker, and I'm
Right.
alcoholic.
Yeah.
Ugh, an alcoholic.
Welcome to Tucker Carlson.
Like,
I'm an
It's
alcoholic.
just- there's something about it that's
Welcome to
so
Red Scare.
like I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
And, but you have to, and there's
You have to
something-
have the humility to
Oh.
say it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very pro-spiritual and pro-social program, which implies that you have to leave your ego at the door. You have to be humbled and
Oh my
chastened.
gosh.
Because it treats addiction, which I think it is, as a spiritual malady. So how you have to address it with.
You have no power to fix it. Like anyone who's been driven by a compulsion, it doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol, but there are all kinds of compulsions that rule our lives.
Yeah.
And you know that it's impossible to defeat without help. And ultimately, the point of AA is to say out loud the only help is from God. And they're very imprecise in defining God. They kind of leave it up to you. They call it a higher power.
Yeah.
But the point is...
But it was invented by a Catholic, by the way.
Yes, Bill W.
Well, on the West Coast.
I think in the Midwest.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not I am not an expert on this at all. I just
Yeah.
know that I love it, and I'm always going to go to AA meetings whenever I remember to and have time because I enjoy this.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is people arrive at an AA meeting in the correct posture, which is prostrate. Like, I suck.
Yeah.
And only when you acknowledge the truth, it's not even like ritual self-abnegation. It's like just acknowledging what's completely real. I can't extend my life a single day. Really, I'm not in control of anything. I could be hit by a car, so could my loved ones. Like, you don't have control.
You could be assassinated.
Yeah. But to say that out loud and to really believe it is the only posture that allows you to really experience God.
Yeah, I mean, at some point along the line, it feels like God was supplanted by therapy,
Yes.
was supplanted by self-help. And one thing I noticed about going to AA meetings, I started going recently
Wait, you did?
as a supporter, not as an
Yeah.
alcoholic, big cope, and with a person who's
Yes.
in the program. I started noticing that a lot of the speakers, the people who were qualifying, were essentially highly intelligent, highly neurotic, and I guess in modern day therapy speak, we're suffering from what we would call like narcissism.
Yes.
And in the sense that they were not grandiose or egomaniacal, but that they were completely self-preoccupied and
They were
self-absorbed. They couldn't
slaves to
see
their
past themselves.
Yeah. Which
And-
is also why the program makes an emphasis of like being of service to others.
Yes, and of
I've seen
being
very
with God.
little. So I grew up in Southern California, so there was just the whole culture was a culture of narcissism.
Yeah.
And narcissism is, predicated on the lie that you're in control. It's narcissism, an attempt to maintain control of the lies that you construct about yourself. This is my
Well
view
said.
of it. And the requirement, once again, of AA is to admit that all of that is fake. And that is the most liberating thing you can ever do.
Yeah.
Like,
And
there's nothing in your life that frees you more than that.
I mean, you see with like when people go through like narcissistic breaks or meltdowns, it's basically because of the kind of image the self-image they were sustaining in public to other people has been punctured.
Yes.
Usually by someone outside of them, like an authority figure or a loved one,
Exactly.
who then they demote and diminish in their eyes. But I did want to ask you, like, about sobriety in general, because you said that you never had a rock bottom, and
You had that night in Vegas.
yeah. And so I guess my question is, like, what was it that finally made you stop?
Well, I didn't have a rock bottom in the sense that I never lost my wife or children. My wife was 10 days from giving birth to our fourth child when I quit. So, and I had a TV show. I mean, I was on TV every night. So I definitely had been successful by a lot of some measures anyway. But, you know, I had some moments that were pretty, you know, I was a morning drinker, a pretty committed morning drinker. And the hilarious thing about, like, any compulsion, it's not just booze, but is, like, you can justify it in these, like, crazy, inventive, kind of brilliant ways. And the way that I justified morning drinking, I was like, it's not that I'm dependent on alcohol or I'm like a slobbering alcoholic. I was like, I've got 3 kids and a wife and a job and a really demanding life, and I don't have time to be hungover. Like, I'm a problem solver.
Right.
Daddy doesn't fuck around. Like, I've got a goal, and I'm going to achieve that goal, whatever it takes. And if I need to take the extraordinary step, a step of self-denial of drinking like half a quart of vodka in the morning straight, chasing it with a cigarette, like, I'll do that because I'm that goal-oriented.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let this hangover get in the way
That's
Right,
a functional.
right.
That's what we call a functional
of,
alcohol.
like, getting on an
Exactly.
airplane. No, but I
The
like...
world is run by functional alcoholics.
No, but I
Another
created a
tweet from that
story
account.
in my head, like, that was heroic. Like, I'm the hero of the story. Like, I remember being in the Milwaukee airport at like 5:30 in the morning in a rental car, and I was like, I'm too hungover to get on the plane. I just can't. And then I was like, I've got to get on that plane. I've got shit to do back in D.C. I went and got a bottle of vodka. I drank most of it, Smirnoff, in the car alone, watching the sun come up, and I'm like, I am a really tough man. I'm a
got
dutiful
this,
father
yeah.
and husband because I have to get back to Washington, and that's why I'm drinking this vodka. Like, that's insane,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
what I told myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I mean, I know you're not supposed to talk about what goes down in those rooms, but a friend of mine recently told me a story about a woman who he heard qualify. She was like the main event, the main speaker, and she was an elderly woman who was clearly very wealthy, very attractive, put together, had been a successful businesswoman her whole life. And the way that she broke it down was into decades. In my 20s, it was about having fun and meeting guys, but probably about dissolving some of my social anxieties. In my 30s, it was because I deserved it, because I was married with kids and had a high-pressure job. In my 40s, it was because I really needed it. In my 50s, it was because there was nothing left. And at some point, she told the story of getting like kicked out of an upscale bar by uniformed police officers, kicking and screaming, "Do you know who I am?" And that sounds like a flex or a threat, but she literally meant it in like,
I don't know.
I don't know who I am. I
Yeah.
don't know my identity. I don't know my address. Can you tell me who I am?
That's really heavy. I'm
Yeah.
just so grateful every day I never got to that point.
But how much of sobriety, though, would you say is like physiological or hormonal?
A lot of alcohol. I used too much cocaine also, but I never was physically addicted in any sense to cocaine. And the main problem with cocaine for me was it's the kind of thing you don't do it unless you're drinking.
Right.
You know, you never wake up like, gotta buy an 8-ball. But like, you know, 5 drinks in, you're like, oh my gosh, you got some blow, okay. The problem for me was stay up way too late, you know, to dawn. And then the hangover from it was just completely debilitating for me, and it would cause me to drink more.
Right.
So it was a cycle. But I really learned when I got off booze, which I did by myself without even telling anybody. I learned how physically addicted I was to alcohol. Like, I had no idea. And the withdrawal from it was just absolutely crazy.
Oh,
I mean, I
yeah,
didn't get the
that could
DTs. I
kill
didn't
you,
wind up in the
yeah.
hospital. It can kill
Yeah,
you. I
yeah.
wasn't at that point. I was 33. But it was intense. And I didn't know much about, even though my mother was an alcoholic, and I did grow up in a WASP culture where there's an awful lot of drinking. But I didn't know much about alcohol. And so I felt the physical part of it was, everyone's always like, oh, you know, people drink because they're trying to get rid of their problems. Well, actually, I always had a happy marriage. I love my children. I love my job. I wasn't unhappy.
You were probably a fun drunk, I bet.
I really wasn't.
No,
Are you
really?
a belligerent drunk?
Yeah, I mean, got in several fistfights. I lost 2 of them. As an adult man with kids, and a job at CNN. Yeah, I got 2 black eyes.
Oh man.
While working at CNN, and
Did you have to go on air?
yeah, I did.
And they
in
had to
one,
spackle
I
you with
got
concealer?
punched out on the street in Newport, Rhode Island, at a bachelor party, and then flew back to Washington at like 6 a.m. to do this Sunday morning show at CNN with a black eye, and they can't cover it very well. I mean,
Yeah.
well,
There's only so much they can do.
they really can't do a lot. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. It's
anybody
not that
notice?
interesting, but I was not a great drunk, and I would get drunk and I would like fall asleep in public or be hyper aggressive. And it's very unattractive. I was super unattractive. I was not a
Yeah.
great drunk at all. I felt like I'm much more entertaining sober than I was ever drunk.